The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Clara Dawson stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk of Unionville, Nevada, her legs trembling from more than just the 3-day journey from San Francisco. It was the spring of 1878, and she had traveled over 200 miles to accept a position as a schoolteacher in this mining town nestled in the Humboldt Range, hoping to leave behind the suffocating memories of her former life. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the main street, and Clara clutched her carpetbag tighter, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar faces of miners, merchants, and cowboys who populated this rough frontier town. "Miss Dawson." A woman's voice cut through the din of rattling wagons and shouting men. Clara turned to see a plump, kind-faced woman in a faded calico dress approaching. "I'm Mrs. Henderson, the mayor's wife. We've been expecting you." Clara managed a tired smile. "Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Henderson." "I'm grateful for the warm welcome. Come along, dear. We'll get you settled at the boarding house, and tomorrow I'll show you the schoolhouse." Mrs. Henderson linked her arm through Clara's and began leading her down the boardwalk. "It's not much, but the children are eager to have a proper teacher. The last one married a silver miner and moved to Virginia City 6 months ago." As they walked, Clara noticed the town was busier than she had anticipated. Unionville had sprung up during the silver rush of the 1860s, and though the boom days had passed, enough ore remained in the surrounding mountains to keep the town alive and reasonably prosperous. The main street boasted a general store, 2 saloons, a hotel, a blacksmith, and various other establishments necessary for frontier life. They had just passed the livery stable when a commotion erupted behind them. Clara heard shouting and the thundering of hooves. She turned, and her blood ran cold. A massive chestnut horse was charging down the street, its eyes wild with panic, reins trailing in the dust. People scattered, pressing themselves against storefronts and diving behind water troughs. The world seemed to slow down. Clara's vision narrowed to a tunnel, the edges going dark. Her breath caught in her throat, and her entire body locked rigid with terror. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the approaching animal with absolute paralyzing fear. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and pulled her forcefully to the side, pressing her against the wall of the mercantile just as the horse thundered past, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its body and smell the sharp scent of its sweat. She found herself crushed against a broad chest, arms wrapped protectively around her, shielding her from the chaos. For several heartbeats, Clara couldn't breathe. Then, slowly, the world came back into focus. She became aware of the steady thump of a heartbeat beneath her ear, the scent of leather and sage, and the firm but gentle grip of the man who had saved her. "Easy now," a deep, calm voice said above her head. "You're safe. The horse is gone." Clara pulled back slightly and looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn Stetson. His face was all hard planes and angles, weathered from years of outdoor work, but his eyes held a kindness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, his hands still steadying her by the elbows. Clara tried to speak, but her throat had gone dry. She shook her head, then found her voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine, thank you." Mrs. Henderson bustled over, fanning herself with her hand. "Gracious, that was close. Thank you, Kai. That blamed horse belonged to those miners staying at the hotel. They don't know the first thing about properly hitching an animal." "No harm done," the man said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face, "though the lady looks like she could use some water." Clara realized she was still shaking, and worse, tears were threatening to spill from her eyes. She straightened her spine and stepped back, putting some distance between herself and her rescuer. "I'm perfectly well. Just startled, that's all." But even as she said it, her hands trembled as she smoothed down her traveling dress. The man noticed. She could tell by the slight concern that creased his brow, but he was gentleman enough not to comment. "Kai, this is Miss Clara Dawson, our new schoolteacher," Mrs. Henderson said. "Miss Dawson, this is Kai Emerson. He owns the largest cattle ranch in the valley, about 5 miles northeast of town." Kai touched the brim of his hat. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Dawson. Welcome to Unionville." "Thank you, Mr. Emerson." Clara forced herself to meet his eyes, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "And thank you for your quick thinking just now. Just happened to be in the right place." He glanced down the street where several men had finally managed to corner and calm the runaway horse. "You take care now." He tipped his hat again and walked away, his long strides carrying him toward the general store. Clara watched him go, something fluttering in her chest that had nothing to do with her earlier fright. "He's a good man," Mrs. Henderson said, following Clara's gaze. "Lost his wife to fever 3 years back. Been running that ranch alone ever since, except for his hands. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's always been fair and honest in his dealings." Clara nodded, filing away this information, though she told herself it didn't matter. She was here to teach, not to develop any romantic entanglements. She had learned that lesson the hard way back in San Francisco. The boarding house was a tidy 2-story structure painted white with green shutters. Mrs. Brennan, the proprietress, was a widow in her 50s who ran a respectable establishment and served hearty meals 3 times a day. Clara's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the street. That night, as Clara lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier town, her mind kept drifting back to blue eyes and strong hands. She shook her head against the pillow, annoyed with herself. She had more important things to think about, like preparing for her first day with the students. But as sleep finally claimed her, her last waking thought was of Kai Emerson, and the way he had looked at her with such concern and gentleness. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden structure at the eastern edge of town, painted white with a bell tower that had seen better days. Inside, rows of desks and benches faced a blackboard, and a pot-bellied stove sat in the corner, cold now in the spring warmth but essential during the harsh Nevada winters. Clara had 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Most were children of miners and merchants, though a few came from the small ranches scattered throughout the valley. They were rough around the edges, with the wild energy of frontier children, but Clara had taught in San Francisco's less affluent neighborhoods before her dismissal, and she knew how to handle a challenging classroom. By the end of her first week, she had established a routine and earned the grudging respect of even her most difficult students. She was firm but fair, and she had a gift for making even the driest subjects come alive with her storytelling. On Saturday, Clara decided to explore the town more thoroughly. The day was beautiful, with a clear blue sky and a pleasant breeze that carried the scent of sagebrush from the surrounding hills. She had just purchased some writing paper at the general store when she heard Mrs. Henderson calling to her from across the street. "Miss Dawson, would you care to join us for a picnic tomorrow after church? Several families are planning to gather at the creek north of town. It would be a wonderful opportunity for you to get to know people better." Clara hesitated. Social gatherings made her nervous, especially after the scandal that had forced her to leave San Francisco. But she knew she needed to integrate herself into the community if she wanted to make a life here. "That sounds lovely," she said. "What can I bring?" "Just yourself, dear." We'll have plenty of food." The next morning, Clara attended services at the small wooden church and then joined the caravan of wagons heading to the picnic spot. The creek was a ribbon of clear water running through a grove of cottonwood trees, creating a welcome oasis of shade. Children immediately began wading in the shallows while the women spread blankets and unpacked baskets of food. Clara was helping Mrs. Henderson arrange plates when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Ladies." She turned to find Kai Emerson standing a few feet away, his hat in his hands. He wore a clean white shirt and dark trousers, clearly his Sunday best, and Clara felt her heart skip in a way that annoyed her. "Kai, I'm so glad you could make it," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "You worked too hard out on that ranch all by yourself. You need to socialize more." "I have my foreman and hands for company," he said with a slight smile, but his eyes drifted to Clara. "Miss Dawson, how are you finding Unionville?" "Very well, thank you," Clara replied, acutely aware of the interested looks several women were directing their way. Small towns thrived on gossip, and she had no desire to become its subject. "The students are wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. Education is important, especially out here." Before Clara could respond, several men called Kai over to help set up a horseshoe pitch, and he excused himself with a nod. Clara watched him go, then caught herself and focused determinedly on arranging potato salad. The afternoon passed pleasantly. Clara found herself talking with several of the mothers, discussing their children's progress and answering questions about her background. She kept her answers vague, mentioning only that she had taught in San Francisco and wanted a change of pace. No one pressed for details, for which she was grateful. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, the men organized wagon races for the children. Several of the ranchers had brought gentle horses, and the older children took turns riding them around a makeshift course while their parents cheered. Clara stood beneath the cottonwoods, watching the festivities with a smile, until one of the mothers approached her. "Miss Dawson, my Sarah is too nervous to ride by herself. Would you mind walking alongside her, just to give her confidence?" Clara's smile froze. She looked toward the horses, her chest tightening. I'm not sure I'm the best person." "Oh, you wouldn't have to do anything difficult. Just walk beside old Daisy there. She's gentle as a lamb." The horse in question was a dappled gray mare standing patiently while a ranch hand held her reins. She did look calm and docile, but Clara's hands had already begun to sweat. Her mind flashed back to another time, another horse, blood on the ground and her father's broken body. "I really don't think—" Clara began, but the woman had already called her daughter over and now other people were watching. Heat crept up Clara's neck. She couldn't explain her fear, not without revealing more than she wanted to, not without looking weak and foolish. "I'll walk with Sarah." Kai's voice, calm and steady, came from behind her. Clara turned to find him standing there, his expression neutral but his eyes understanding in a way that made her want to cry with relief and shame in equal measure. "Are you sure, Kai?" the mother asked. "I hate to impose." "No imposition at all." He smiled at the little girl. "What do you say, Sarah? Want to show everyone how brave you are?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically, and just like that, Clara was released from her obligation. She stepped back, watching as Kai led the child and the mare to the starting line, his patient instructions carrying on the evening breeze. Mrs. Henderson appeared at Clara's elbow. "You don't like horses much, do you, dear?" Clara considered denying it, but something about the older woman's kind expression made her tell the truth. "No, I'm afraid I don't." "Nothing wrong with that. Plenty of folk are nervous around large animals." Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. "Though it can be difficult living out here where horses are so essential." Clara nodded, her throat tight. She knew it was more than difficult. It was a serious handicap. in a place where nearly everyone rode, where horses pulled wagons and plows and carried people across vast distances. Her fear marked her as different, as unsuitable for frontier life. She watched Kai walk beside Sarah, and the mare, one hand resting lightly on the horse's neck, the other ready to catch the child if she slipped. His presence seemed to calm both the girl and the animal. When they completed the circuit, Sarah was beaming with pride, and the gathered families applauded warmly. Later, as people began packing up to head home, Kai approached Clara again. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air had grown cooler. "Miss Dawson, may I speak with you for a moment?" Clara's pulse quickened, but she nodded and walked with him a short distance from the others, until they stood near the creek bank where the burble of water provided a measure of privacy. "I don't mean to pry," Kai began, his voice gentle, "but I noticed your reaction earlier, and when that horse ran wild in town last week. You're frightened of them, aren't you?" Clara's first instinct was to deny it, but something about Kai Emerson made her want to be honest. Perhaps it was the lack of judgment in his eyes or the genuine concern in his voice. Whatever it was, she found herself nodding. "Yes," she said quietly, the admission like a weight lifting from her chest. "I'm terrified of horses." Kai didn't laugh or look at her with pity. He simply nodded, as if she had told him something perfectly reasonable. "Mind if I ask why?" Clara looked down at the water rushing over smooth stones. She hadn't spoken about this in years, had tried to bury it deep where it couldn't hurt her anymore. But standing here in the fading light with this kind, patient man, the words came tumbling out. "My father owned a feed store in Sacramento when I was 12. One day, a customer's horse spooked while my father was helping unload supplies. The horse reared and my father was knocked down. He hit his head on the wagon wheel." She wrapped her arms around herself, though the evening wasn't truly cold. "He never woke up, died 3 days later." "I'm sorry," Kai said, and the simple sincerity in those 2 words meant more than any elaborate condolence. "After that, we moved to San Francisco to live with my mother's sister. I've avoided horses ever since. In the city it was possible, but here—" She gestured vaguely at the landscape around them. "Here, I'm not sure how I'll manage." Kai was quiet for a moment, and Clara braced herself for what would surely come next. He would tell her she was being foolish, that she needed to overcome her fear, that she couldn't live in the West without learning to handle horses. She had told herself all these things 1,000 times. Instead, he said something that made her look up in surprise. "Then I'll walk beside you until you're ready." Clara stared at him, uncertain she had heard correctly. "What? Your fear comes from a real tragedy. You're not being silly or weak. But living here without being able to at least tolerate horses will be hard, maybe impossible in the long run." His blue eyes held her steadily. "If you want, I could help you. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just small steps at your pace, and I'd be right there beside you the whole time." "Why would you do that?" Clara asked, her voice barely audible over the creek. "You don't even know me." A hint of a smile touched Kai's lips. "Maybe I'd like to." Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Henderson called out that the wagons were leaving. The moment broke, and Clara found herself walking back to join the others, her mind spinning with Kai's offer. That night, lying in her narrow bed at the boarding house, Clara replayed the conversation over and over. Part of her wanted to refuse his help. She had learned in San Francisco that depending on a man's kindness could lead to heartbreak and ruin. Her dismissal from her previous teaching position had come after she rejected the advances of the school board president's son, who then spread vicious lies about her character. She had come to Nevada to start fresh, to be independent and self-sufficient. But another part of her, the part that had felt safe in Kai's arms when he pulled her from the runaway horse's path, the part that had relaxed slightly at his calm, non-judgmental understanding. That part wanted to trust him. Finally, as dawn light began to creep through her window, Clara made her decision. She would accept his help, but she would be careful. She would keep her heart guarded and her expectations reasonable. He was simply being kind, offering assistance as one neighbor to another. Nothing more. Monday afternoon, after dismissing her students, Clara found Kai waiting outside the schoolhouse, leaning against a fence post with his hat tipped back. Her heart did that annoying skip again at the sight of him. "Mr. Emerson," she said, pleased that her voice sounded steady. "I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to know if you'd thought about my offer." He straightened, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the afternoon sun. "No pressure either way. I just wanted you to know I meant it." Clara set down the stack of slates she had been carrying. "I've thought about it. And I'd like to accept your help if the offer still stands." The smile that lit Kai's face transformed him from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. "It stands. When would you like to start? I suppose there's no time like the present." "Actually, if you're willing, I'd like you to come out to my ranch Saturday. That way we can work without an audience and you can meet the horses in a calm environment. I'll send my foreman, Tom, to drive you out in the wagon Friday after school if that suits you. You could stay the weekend, head back Sunday evening. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, maintains a guest room and would be happy for the company." The suggestion was bold but not improper, given the presence of servants. Still, Clara hesitated. Spending an entire weekend at his ranch seemed like more intimacy than was wise, but practicality won out over caution. If she was going to overcome this fear, she needed time and privacy to work through it. Having half the town watching would only make her more anxious. "All right," she agreed. Saturday it is. The week passed slowly, each day dragging as Clara found herself anticipating and dreading Saturday in equal measure. She told Mrs. Henderson where she would be, enduring the older woman's knowing looks with as much grace as she could muster. "Kai Emerson is a good man, Mrs. Henderson said for what felt like the 100th time. "You could do far worse." "He's simply helping me with my fear of horses," Clara protested. "There's nothing more to it than neighborly kindness." "Of course, dear, nothing at all." Friday afternoon arrived, and true to his word, Kai sent his foreman to collect her. Tom was a weathered man in his 50s with a graying beard and kind eyes. He helped Clara into the wagon with courteous efficiency and kept up a steady stream of pleasant conversation during the 5-mile journey to the ranch. "Boss has been working himself ragged getting everything ready for your visit," Tom said as the wagon crested a hill and the ranch came into view. "Had us clean out the entire stable, curry all the horses until they shine, mend every fence. You'd think the president himself was coming." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. He shouldn't have gone to such trouble. Been good for him, actually, given him something to focus on besides work. Man needs more in his life than cattle and ledgers. The Emerson Ranch was larger and more prosperous than Clara had expected. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Beyond it stood a large barn, several outbuildings, and an extensive system of corrals and pastures. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and Clara could see several ranch hands working near the barn. Kai emerged from the house as the wagon pulled up, and Clara's breath caught. He had removed his hat, and the afternoon sun caught in his dark hair. He wore working clothes, canvas trousers, and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. "Miss Dawson, welcome." He helped her down from the wagon with the same gentle strength he had shown when he pulled her from the runaway horse's path. "How was the journey?" "Very pleasant, thank you." Clara smoothed her skirts, suddenly self-conscious. "Tom was excellent company. Let me show you to your room so you can freshen up. Then I'll introduce you to Mrs. Chen and give you a tour of the ranch. We won't do any work with the horses today. I want you to settle in first, get comfortable with the surroundings." The inside of the house surprised Clara with its warmth and tasteful furnishing. She had expected the rough, utilitarian dwelling of a bachelor rancher, but the rooms showed evidence of a woman's touch, preserved and maintained even after her passing. Hand-stitched curtains hung at the windows, watercolor paintings adorned the walls, and fresh flowers sat in vases on the tables. The guest room was lovely, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dressing table with an oval mirror, and windows that looked out over the valley. A pitcher of fresh water and clean towels had been set out for her use. "Your wife had excellent taste," Clara said softly, running her hand over the quilt's intricate stitching. Kai's expression grew distant for a moment. "Elizabeth loved this place. Spent 3 years making it a home before the fever took her. Mrs. Chen has kept everything just as she left it. It's beautiful." "She would have liked you," Kai said, then seemed surprised by his own words. He cleared his throat. "Take your time settling in. I'll be on the porch when you're ready." Alone in the room, Clara unpacked her small bag and washed the dust from her face and hands. She looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a woman of 23 with dark blonde hair, gray eyes, and a face that was pleasant if not beautiful. What did Kai Emerson see when he looked at her? And why did it matter so much? She shook her head at her reflection and went to find him. The tour of the ranch took over an hour. Kai showed her the barns, the storage buildings, the smokehouse, and the spring house. He introduced her to his hands, a mixture of young cowboys and older, experienced cattlemen who treated their boss with evident respect and affection. Finally, they approached the stables, and Clara felt her anxiety spike. Kai must have sensed it because he stopped several yards away. "We don't have to go closer today." Clara forced herself to take a deep breath. "No, I want to see it. I just need a moment." They stood there in the late afternoon sun, and Kai waited patiently while Clara gathered her courage. Finally, she nodded and they walked forward together. The stable was immaculate, as Tom had suggested. 8 stalls lined the interior, and Clara could see horses peering out over the half-doors, their dark eyes curious. The smell of hay and leather and horse was overwhelming, and her hands began to shake. "This is Duke," Kai said, stopping at the first stall. The horse inside was a magnificent bay stallion with a white blaze on his face. "He's my personal mount. Smart, strong, but he's got a temperament that requires an experienced hand." They moved down the line, and Kai introduced each horse, sharing their names and personalities. There was Bella, a sleek black mare with an independent streak. Thunder, a gray gelding who loved to run. Copper, a chestnut with a gentle disposition. And at the end, in the last stall, stood the smallest horse Clara had ever seen. "This is Sunshine," Kai said, his voice softening. "She's what they call a Mustang pony. Found her 3 years ago, injured and half-starved. Nursed her back to health, but she's never gotten over being skittish. Too small for riding, except maybe for children, but she's got the sweetest heart of any creature I've ever known." Sunshine was a golden palomino, barely 14 hands high, with a flaxen mane and tail. She stood at the back of her stall, watching them with large, liquid eyes that somehow seemed as nervous as Clara felt. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered. "Would you like to try touching her?" Every instinct screamed no, but Clara found herself nodding. Kai opened the stall door and stepped inside, speaking in low, soothing tones. Sunshine's ears flicked forward and she took a hesitant step toward him. "Come on, girl. There's someone I want you to meet." The pony moved closer, stretching her neck to snuffle at Kai's outstretched hand. He stroked her nose gently, then turned to Clara. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "But if you want to try, just put your hand on her neck. She won't hurt you." Clara stood frozen at the stall door. Her heart hammered against her ribs and her breathing had gone shallow. The pony was so much smaller than the horse that had killed her father, so much gentler in appearance, but the fear was still there, a living thing in her chest. Then Kai extended his other hand to her. "I'm right here. I won't let anything happen to you." Clara looked at his hand, steady and strong, and then at his face, patient and understanding. Slowly, trembling, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and reassuring. "One step," he said. "Just one." Clara took the step, then another, until she stood beside Kai in the stall. Sunshine watched her with those gentle eyes, making no sudden moves. "Put your other hand here." Kai guided her free hand to rest on Sunshine's neck. The pony's coat was soft and warm beneath Clara's palm. She could feel the animal's breathing, steady and calm. "She's so warm," Clara breathed, surprise momentarily overriding her fear. "Horses have hearts just like ours," Kai said softly. "They can feel fear too, just like you. Sunshine understands being scared." They stood there for several long minutes, Clara's hand on the horse's neck, Kai's hand holding hers. Gradually, Clara felt her breathing slow, her muscles relax fractionally. She wasn't cured of her fear, not by any means, but for the first time in 11 years, she had touched a horse and survived. When they finally stepped out of the stall, Clara felt shaky but oddly triumphant. Kai was smiling at her with such pride that she couldn't help but smile back. "You did wonderfully," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you." The words came out more intimate than she had intended, and she saw something flicker in Kai's eyes, something that made her pulse race for reasons that had nothing to do with horses. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, turned out to be a small, efficient Chinese woman in her 60s who had come to Nevada during the railroad construction boom and stayed when her husband found work at the mines. After his death 5 years ago, she had taken the position at the Emerson ranch and ran the household with quiet competence. Dinner that evening was a revelation. Mrs. Chen had prepared roasted chicken with vegetables from the ranch's garden, fresh bread, and an apple pie that melted on the tongue. Clara and Kai ate at the large dining table, and conversation flowed more easily than Clara had expected. Kai told her about his childhood in Missouri, how he had come west with his parents as a young man seeking opportunity. He had worked various jobs before saving enough to buy land and start his ranch. Elizabeth had been the daughter of a Unionville merchant, and they had married after a courtship of 8 months. "She wanted children," Kai said quietly, staring at his coffee cup. "We tried for 2 years, but it never happened. Then the fever came through. Took 6 people in town, including Elizabeth. She was gone in 4 days." "I'm so sorry," Clara said, and meant it. She could hear the grief in his voice, still raw despite the passage of time. "What about you?" Kai asked, clearly wanting to shift the subject. "How did you end up in Unionville?" Clara hesitated, then decided he had shared his pain so she could share hers, at least part of it. "My mother died when I was 15. Influenza. After that, it was just my aunt and me. She helped me get my teaching certificate, and I taught at a school in San Francisco for 3 years. "What made you leave?" Clara chose her words carefully. "I had a disagreement with the administration. It seemed best to make a fresh start elsewhere." Kai looked like he wanted to ask more, but he respected her privacy and let the matter drop. They talked of other things, easier things, until the evening grew late and Mrs. Chen began clearing the dishes. "We'll start again tomorrow," Kai said as he walked Clara to the stairs. "Same as today. Just being near the horses, getting comfortable with their presence. No pressure, no rush." "Thank you," Clara said, "for everything, for your patience and kindness." "It's my pleasure, Clara." The use of her first name sent warmth through her chest. "Sleep well." That night, Clara lay in the comfortable bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the wind rustling through the cottonwoods near the house, the occasional whinny from the stables. She thought about Kai's hand holding hers, his calm presence beside her in Sunshine's stall, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. Her heart was already beginning to betray her resolve to remain independent. But for the first time since leaving San Francisco in disgrace, she felt something that might be hope. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her simplest day dress and went downstairs to find Kai and Mrs. Chen already up and about. "Morning," Kai greeted her, his smile warm. "Hope you're hungry. Mrs. Chen believes in a hearty breakfast." The meal was indeed substantial. Eggs and bacon and biscuits with honey. And Clara found herself eating more than she usually did, the fresh air and nervous energy having worked up her appetite. After breakfast, they walked to the stables again. This time, Clara's fear was slightly less overwhelming, though her hands still shook as they approached Sunshine's stall. "Today, I thought we might try feeding her," Kai said, producing an apple from his pocket. "Horses love treats and it helps build trust." He showed Clara how to hold the apple flat on her palm so Sunshine could take it without accidentally nipping fingers. Then he placed a second apple in Clara's hand. "Your turn." Clara stared at the apple, her heart pounding. But Kai was beside her as he had promised, and somehow that made all the difference. She extended her hand toward Sunshine, who stretched her neck forward, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the fruit. The pony's lips were soft as velvet as they brushed Clara's palm, taking the apple with gentle precision. Clara gasped in surprise and delight. "She likes you," Kai said, and the pleasure in his voice made Clara feel absurdly proud. They spent the morning with the horses, and by lunchtime, Clara had not only fed Sunshine multiple times but had also stroked her nose and mane, and even helped Kai brush her coat. It was exhausting, the constant battle against her fear, but also exhilarating. That afternoon, Kai suggested a walk around the ranch to give Clara a break from the intensity of facing her phobia. They strolled through the meadows where cattle grazed, and Kai pointed out various landmarks: the creek that provided water for the livestock, the line of cottonwoods that marked the northern boundary of his property, the distant mountains still capped with snow despite the spring warmth. "It's beautiful here," Clara said, pausing to look out over the valley. "So much space, so much sky. In San Francisco, everything felt cramped and crowded." "That's what I love most about this life," Kai agreed. "The freedom of it, though it can be lonely too. You ever think about remarrying?" The question escaped before Clara could stop it, and she immediately felt her face heat. "I'm sorry, that was too personal." "No, it's all right." Kai was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the horizon. "I think about it sometimes. Elizabeth would have hated the idea of me being alone forever. But it's hard to imagine opening my heart like that again, risking that kind of loss." "I understand," Clara said softly. And she did, though her own reluctance came from different wounds. They walked back to the ranch house in comfortable silence, and Clara realized with some surprise that she felt completely at ease with Kai. There was no pressure to fill every moment with conversation, no awkward tension. He was simply good company, steady and calm and kind. That evening, after another excellent dinner, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Mrs. Chen had retired to her quarters, and they were alone with the gathering darkness and the chorus of crickets. "Can I ask you something?" Kai said, his voice quiet in the twilight. "Of course." "Why did you really leave San Francisco?" Clara tensed, her first instinct to deflect or lie. But sitting here in the peaceful darkness with this man who had shown her nothing but respect and patience, the truth came spilling out. "There was a man," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The son of one of the school board members. He decided he wanted to court me, but I wasn't interested. He was arrogant and cruel, and I saw how he treated people he considered beneath him. I refused his advances politely at first, but he was persistent." "What happened?" Kai's voice was tight, controlled. "He cornered me one day after school, tried to force himself on me. I fought him off, scratched his face badly enough to leave marks. He was furious." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, remembering. "The next day, he told his father and the other board members that I had behaved inappropriately toward him, that I had invited his attentions, and then falsely cried assault when he rejected me. His scratches, he claimed, came from me attacking him in anger. They believed him." Kai's voice was rough with barely suppressed anger. "His father believed him, or pretended to. That was enough. I was dismissed immediately, and rumors spread throughout the city that I was a woman of loose morals. No other school would hire me. My aunt was mortified by the scandal. So when I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Unionville, I applied immediately. They were desperate enough not to check my references too closely." Kai was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but fierce. "You know that what happened to you wasn't your fault, right? That man was a coward and a liar." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "Knowing it and feeling it are two different things. I've spent the last 6 months wondering if I did something to encourage him, if I could have handled it differently." "No." Kai's hand found hers in the darkness, his grip firm and warm. "Don't do that to yourself. You did nothing wrong. He's the one who should be ashamed, not you." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek, then another. She hadn't cried when it happened, hadn't let herself feel the full weight of the injustice. She had simply packed her bags and fled. But now, with Kai's hand in hers and his quiet conviction wrapping around her like a blanket, something inside her broke open. Kai pulled her into his arms, and Clara buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing out months of fear and shame and loneliness. He held her through it all, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort. "You're safe now," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Eventually, the tears subsided and Clara pulled back, embarrassed by her loss of control. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart like that." "Don't apologize. You've been carrying that alone for too long." Kai's thumb gently wiped the remaining tears from her cheek. "Thank you for trusting me enough to share it." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Clara was afraid to name. Kai's face was close to hers, his eyes dark in the fading light, his hand still cradling her cheek. She thought he might kiss her, hoped and feared it in equal measure, but he stepped back, clearing his throat. "It's getting late. You should get some rest. We'll work with the horses again tomorrow." Clara nodded, her emotions too raw for words. She went inside and climbed the stairs to her room, her mind spinning with everything that had happened, everything she had revealed. She had come to Unionville to hide from her past, to build a life free from the complications of men and romance. But lying in bed that night, she had to admit the truth to herself. She was falling in love with Kai Emerson. Sunday morning arrived too quickly. Clara woke with a bittersweet feeling, knowing this was her last day at the ranch, at least for now. Over breakfast, Kai suggested one final session with the horses before Tom drove her back to town that afternoon. In Sunshine's stall, Clara was able to approach the pony without Kai's hand to hold, though he remained close by. She stroked the golden coat, marveling at how something that had terrified her just days ago now seemed almost manageable. "You've made incredible progress," Kai said, pride evident in his voice. "A few more sessions like this, and you might even be ready to try sitting on her." The thought still made Clara's stomach clench, but it no longer seemed impossible. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. You're stronger than you think, Clara." He paused, then added, "I'd like to continue these sessions if you're willing. You could come out to the ranch every Saturday. I'll send Tom to fetch you, or I could come myself if you prefer." "I'd like that," Clara said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "Very much." The ride back to Unionville was quiet, both of them lost in thought. As Tom's wagon rolled down the main street and stopped in front of the boarding house, Kai helped Clara down, his hands lingering on her waist. "I'll see you next Saturday then," he said. "I'll count the days," Clara replied, then blushed at how eager she sounded. But Kai just smiled, that warm, devastating smile that made her heart skip. "So will I." The week that followed dragged interminably. Clara threw herself into teaching, preparing elaborate lessons to keep her students engaged and her mind off Saturday. But every night, lying in bed, she thought of Kai, his gentle patience, his strong hands, the way he had held her while she cried. Mrs. Henderson noticed Clara's distraction and commented on it with a knowing smile. "Kai Emerson must be quite the teacher, to have you so eager for the weekend." "He's helping me overcome my fear," Clara protested weakly. "Oh, I'm sure he is, dear. I'm sure he is." Saturday finally arrived, and Clara's heart leaped when she saw Kai himself driving the wagon, not Tom. He helped her up to the seat beside him, and they rode out to the ranch talking easily about the week's events. The sessions with Sunshine continued, each one building Clara's confidence a little more. By the third weekend, she was able to stand beside the pony without fear clenching her chest. By the fourth, she could lead Sunshine around the corral on a lead rope, Kai walking on the other side, ready to step in if needed but letting Clara take the lead. They fell into a comfortable routine. Clara would arrive Saturday morning, work with the horses, share meals with Kai and Mrs. Chen, and spend the evenings talking on the porch as the stars emerged. Sunday mornings meant another session with Sunshine, then the ride back to town in the afternoon. With each visit, Clara learned more about Kai. She learned that he loved to read, that his small library included not just practical ranching manuals, but poetry and philosophy. She learned that he had a gift for woodworking, and had crafted many of the furniture pieces in the house. She learned that he was unfailingly kind to his workers, paying fair wages and ensuring they had decent housing and food. And Kai learned about her. He listened to her stories of teaching, her dreams of perhaps one day opening a school that taught not just reading and arithmetic but music and art. He heard about her mother's love of gardens, and how Clara still missed the scent of roses that had filled their Sacramento home. He learned that she was brave and determined beneath her fears, that she had a quick wit and a generous heart. The summer heat settled over Nevada, turning the valley golden and dusty. On a particularly warm Saturday in July, after Clara had successfully groomed Sunshine entirely on her own, Kai suggested they cool off at the creek that ran through his property. They walked to the water's edge, Clara carrying a basket of food Mrs. Chen had packed. Kai spread a blanket beneath the cottonwoods, and they ate cold chicken and fresh bread, washing it down with cool water from the creek. "I have something to tell you," Kai said as they finished eating. His tone was serious, and Clara felt a flutter of anxiety. "What is it?" "Tom's daughter in California is getting married next month. He wants to go for the wedding and spend a few weeks with family. I told him to take all the time he needs." Kai paused, then met Clara's eyes. "I was thinking, if you're comfortable with it, you might consider staying at the ranch while he's gone. Just for those weekends, so we can continue your work with the horses. Mrs. Chen would be here, of course, for propriety's sake." It was a bold suggestion, but Clara found she didn't care about potential gossip. The truth was, she looked forward to her weekends at the ranch more than anything else in her life. The thought of missing even one because Tom was away was disappointing. "I think that would be fine," she said. "As long as Mrs. Chen doesn't mind the extra work. She's already given her blessing. Actually suggested it before I worked up the nerve to ask you," Clara laughed. "It seems we have a matchmaker in our midst." "Does that bother you?" Kai's voice was careful, his eyes searching hers. Clara's breath caught. They were treading close to territory they had both been carefully avoiding, the growing feelings that hummed between them like a plucked string. "No," she said honestly. "It doesn't bother me." Kai reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Clara, these last few months with you have been the happiest I've had in 3 years, maybe longer. You've brought light back into my life, made this house feel like a home again." Kai. His name came out as barely a whisper. "I know we said this was just about helping you with the horses, but somewhere along the way it became more, at least for me." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'm falling in love with you, Clara. Actually, I think I already have." Joy burst through Clara's chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I can't help it. You're everything I never knew I needed." Kai's smile was radiant. He cupped her face in his hands and leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Clara met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative and sweet. Then it deepened, months of suppressed longing pouring into it. Kai's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Clara's hands tangled in his hair. She had been kissed before, but never like this, never with such tenderness and passion combined. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kai rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly with everyone knowing my intentions. I want to marry you, Clara, if you'll have me." "Yes," Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll have you." They sat by the creek for hours, talking about their future, making plans and dreams. Kai wanted her to move to the ranch after they married, but he understood she loved teaching and supported her continuing as long as she wanted. Clara talked about expanding the ranch house's library, perhaps hosting gatherings for the community. They spoke of children, though carefully, both aware of how hope and loss could intertwine. As the sun began to set, and they prepared to head back to the house, Clara realized something had shifted. The fear that had gripped her for so long, the fear of depending on someone, of opening her heart to possible pain, had loosened its hold. Kai had proven himself trustworthy in ways large and small, and she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that he would never hurt her intentionally. That evening they told Mrs. Chen their news, and the housekeeper's face lit up with delight. "I knew it," she said, clapping her hands together. "From the first time he brought you here, I knew." "Were we that obvious?" Clara asked, laughing. "The boss couldn't stop talking about you." Clara said this, Clara did that. "I told him weeks ago he should just propose and be done with it." Kai had the grace to look embarrassed. "I wanted to make sure she was ready." "And now I am," Clara said, squeezing his hand. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Kai drove Clara back to town on Sunday and spoke with Mrs. Henderson, formally declaring his intention to court Clara and, eventually, marry her. The news spread through Unionville like wildfire, and Clara found herself the recipient of curious looks and congratulations wherever she went. Some women, Clara knew, gossiped about how quickly the courtship had progressed, but most people seemed genuinely happy for them. Kai was well respected, and Clara had won the community's approval through her dedication to teaching their children. In early August, Kai came to town on a Wednesday evening, surprising Clara after school. He looked serious, almost nervous, and Clara's heart skipped. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. I just couldn't wait until Saturday." He took a deep breath. "Clara, I know we've only been officially courting for a few weeks, but we've known each other for months now. I'm not a young man with time to waste on long engagements. I know what I want, and what I want is you as my wife, sharing my life and my home." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple gold band set with a small diamond. "This was my grandmother's ring. My mother gave it to me before she passed, said to give it to the woman who captured my heart. Clara Dawson, will you marry me?" Clara's vision blurred with tears. "Yes, Kai, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he kissed her there on the boardwalk, in full view of anyone who might be watching, and Clara didn't care one bit about propriety or scandal. They set the wedding date for late September, giving them time to make arrangements, but not so long that the wait would be unbearable. Clara continued teaching, though her students were distracted by their teacher's obvious happiness. She continued her weekend visits to the ranch, and Kai continued helping her work with the horses. One Saturday in mid-August, Kai led Sunshine out of her stall fully saddled. Clara stopped in her tracks, her old fear trying to resurface. "You don't have to if you're not ready," Kai said quickly. "But I think you are. I think you're strong enough now." Clara looked at the pony, then at Kai, then at the saddle. Her hands were sweating, her heart racing, but it was different from the paralyzing terror she had felt months ago. This was nerves, yes, but also excitement. "Talk me through it," she said. Kai showed her how to mount, how to settle into the saddle, how to hold the reins. Then, with infinite patience, he led Sunshine around the corral while Clara sat frozen on her back, gripping the saddle horn so hard her knuckles went white. "Breathe," Kai reminded her. "You're doing great." They walked in circles for 20 minutes, and gradually, Clara began to relax. She felt the rhythm of Sunshine's gait, the warmth of the animal beneath her, the gentle reliability of each step. When they finally stopped and Kai helped her down, Clara was shaking but triumphant. "I did it," she said, her voice full of wonder. "I actually did it." "You did." Kai pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'm so proud of you." That night, Clara realized that Kai had given her more than just help overcoming her fear of horses. He had given her back a piece of herself she thought she had lost forever, the part that could trust, that could hope, that could believe in the goodness of others. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Mrs. Henderson and several other town women helped Clara sew her wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored silk. Mrs. Chen prepared the ranch house for its new mistress, though truth be told, Clara had already been making small changes during her visits, adding her books to the library and her favorite flowers to the vases. Kai seemed to walk on air, his happiness evident to everyone who saw him. His ranch hands teased him mercilessly about being love-struck, but he took it in good humor. On a warm evening 2 weeks before the wedding, Clara and Kai sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had come to treasure. Clara leaned against Kai's shoulder, his arm around her, perfect contentment washing over her. I have a confession, Kai said, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath her ear. Oh, that first day when the horse ran wild in town and I pulled you aside, I knew then. Something in my heart just recognized you, like you were the piece I'd been missing. Clara tilted her head to look up at him. Why didn't you say anything? You were terrified and new in town. The last thing you needed was some rancher declaring feelings for you. I figured helping you with the horses was at least an excuse to spend time with you, to let you get to know me. Very clever, Mr. Emerson. I have my moments. He kissed the top of her head. Best decision I ever made, though. These months with you have been worth everything. Even my irrational fear and crying all over your shirt, especially that. It meant you trusted me enough to be vulnerable. That's not something I take lightly. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began to emerge, sharp and bright in the clear Nevada air. My father would have liked you, Clara said softly. He always said character mattered more than wealth or status. You have character, Kai, integrity. I hope I can live up to that assessment. You already do, every day. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the late September air crisp with the promise of autumn. The ceremony would take place at the church in Unionville, followed by a celebration at the hotel's dining room that Kai had rented for the occasion. Clara woke in her room at the boarding house for the last time, nerves and excitement battling in her stomach. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Chen helped her dress, arranging her hair in an elegant upswept style and placing a simple veil over it. You look beautiful, Mrs. Henderson said, tears in her eyes. Absolutely radiant. Clara studied herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the frightened, defeated person who had stepped off the stagecoach 16 months ago. This woman's eyes shone with confidence and love. This woman had faced her fears and won. This woman was ready to start a new life. The church was packed with townspeople and ranchers from throughout the valley. As Clara walked down the aisle on Tom's arm, he had returned from California just in time and volunteered to give her away. She saw familiar faces smiling at her from the pews. Her students, their parents, merchants she traded with, the women who had welcomed her to their community. But mostly, she saw Kai, standing at the altar in his best suit, his eyes locked on her with such love and adoration that she felt her breath catch. This man, this good, kind, patient man, was about to become her husband. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Matthews spoke of love and partnership, of two souls joining to walk life's path together. When it came time for the vows, Kai's voice was strong and sure. I, Kai Emerson, take you, Clara Dawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and walk beside you through all of life's joys and sorrows, for as long as we both shall live. Clara's voice was steady despite her tears. I, Clara Dawson, take you, Kai Emerson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you through whatever may come, for as long as we both shall live. The rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that matched the engagement ring on Clara's finger. Then, Reverend Matthews smiled and said the words they had been waiting for. I now pronounce you man and wife. Kai, you may kiss your bride. And he did, tenderly and thoroughly, to the applause and cheers of everyone gathered. When they broke apart, both were smiling so broadly it almost hurt. The celebration that followed was joyous. Tables groaned under the weight of food provided by various families. Someone had brought a fiddle, and dancing filled the room. Clara danced first with Kai, then with Tom, then with several of her students' fathers who wanted to congratulate her. As the evening wore on and the party showed no signs of slowing, Kai leaned close to Clara's ear. What do you say we slip away? I'd like to start our married life." Clara blushed but nodded. They made their quiet exit, climbing into the wagon Kai had prepared earlier. The bed was lined with blankets and pillows, their bags already packed for the journey home. The ride to the ranch under the stars was magical. Clara sat close to Kai, his arm around her shoulders, watching the familiar landscape roll by in the moonlight. When they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, lights glowing in the windows, Clara felt a rush of emotion. "Welcome home, Mrs. Emerson," Kai said softly. "Home," Clara repeated, and the word had never sounded sweeter. Mrs. Chen had tactfully retired to her quarters by the time they arrived, leaving the house to the newlyweds. Kai carried Clara over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the front hall. "Are you nervous?" he asked, his hands resting on her waist. "A little," Clara admitted. "But more excited than nervous." "We'll take things slow," Kai promised. "This is our beginning and we have the rest of our lives." He led her upstairs to the master bedroom, a room Clara had never entered before. It was large and comfortable, with a handsome four-poster bed and windows that overlooked the valley. Kai had filled it with candles, their soft light making everything glow warmly. What happened next was tender and sweet and fumbling in the way of two people learning each other for the first time. Kai was patient and gentle, and Clara found herself relaxing into the intimacy, discovering that love could transform even vulnerability into something beautiful. Later, wrapped in Kai's arms with her head on his chest, Clara felt complete in a way she never had before. She had spent so long protecting herself, building walls to keep hurt out. But with Kai, she could be fully herself, fears and scars and all, and be loved not despite them but including them. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Kai replied, his arms tightening around her. "Always." The first months of married life brought adjustments and discoveries. Clara learned the rhythm of ranch life, the early mornings and hard physical work, the satisfaction of tending to animals and land. She continued teaching during the week, riding sunshine into town each morning, something that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Kai had been right. All she had needed was time and patience and someone walking beside her until she was ready. In the evenings, she and Kai would sit together, sometimes rating, sometimes just talking about their days. Mrs. Chen had embraced Clara like a daughter, teaching her Chinese recipes and sharing stories of her own marriage. The ranch hands treated Clara with respect and growing affection. Winter came to Nevada, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Clara loved the way the ranch looked blanketed in white, peaceful and pristine. She and Kai would sit by the fire, planning for the spring, discussing improvements to the ranch and their growing dreams for the future. In February, Clara began feeling unwell. At first, she attributed it to a winter illness, but when the nausea persisted and she missed her monthly courses, hope began to bloom. Mrs. Chen confirmed her suspicions with a knowing smile. "You're with child, I think. All the signs are there." Clara's hands flew to her stomach, wonder and joy and fear mingling together. She remembered what Kai had told her about Elizabeth's desire for children, the hope that had gone unfulfilled. What if the same happened to them? What if she couldn't carry a child to term? But when she told Kai that evening, his reaction banished her fears. He swept her into his arms, tears streaming down his face, and held her like she was made of precious glass. "We're going to have a baby," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Clara, we're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. You've given me everything, Clara, everything I thought I'd lost forever." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring. Clara's students were delighted by the news. and the town women rallied around her with advice and gifts. She had to stop teaching in late April when the morning sickness became too severe, but she used the time to prepare the nursery and rest. Kai was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about Clara's health. She found it endearing even when it bordered on excessive. "I'm not made of porcelain," she reminded him when he insisted she stay off her feet for the entire day. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Yes, but this is my baby, and my wife. I'm allowed to worry." On a hot July afternoon, Clara's labor began. Mrs. Chen sent one of the ranch hands racing for the doctor while she prepared the bedroom. Kai paced the floor downstairs, prevented by propriety from being present but clearly agonized by Clara's occasional cries of pain. After 10 hours of labor, just as the sun was setting, their son was born. The doctor placed the squalling, red-faced infant in Clara's arms, and she fell instantly, completely in love. When Kai was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed with tears streaming down his face. He looked at Clara, exhausted but radiant, and then at the tiny bundle in her arms. "He's perfect," Kai breathed. "Absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold your son?" Clara asked, with shaking hands. Kai took the baby, cradling him against his chest with such tenderness that Clara felt her heart might burst. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your father. And I promise I'm going to do my best by you." They named him William Kai Emerson, William after Clara's father. He was a healthy, loud baby who kept them up nights but filled their days with joy. Clara had never imagined she could love anything as much as she loved Kai, but William proved her wrong. Her heart simply expanded to hold them both. As the years passed, their family grew. Daughter Grace arrived 2 years after William, with Clara's gray eyes and Kai's dark hair. Then came Samuel, sturdy and cheerful, and finally little Elizabeth, named for the wife Kai had lost but who Clara never resented, knowing that loss had shaped the man she loved. The ranch prospered under Kai's careful management. He expanded the herd and bought additional land, but he never let work consume him the way it had before Clara. Family came first, always. Clara eventually stopped teaching to focus on raising their children, but she never lost her love of education. She taught all 4 children to read and write before they were old enough for school, and she maintained a small library in town, donating books and organizing reading groups for the community. Her fear of horses became a distant memory. She rode regularly, though never with the skill and passion of Kai. Sunshine lived to a ripe old age, gentle and sweet to the end, beloved by all the Emerson children who learned to ride on her back. On their 10th anniversary, Kai and Clara sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times before. The children were inside with Mrs. Chen, who despite her advancing years still helped run the household with cheerful efficiency. "You ever regret it?" Kai asked, taking Clara's hand. "Leaving the city, marrying me, giving up teaching to raise children in the middle of Nevada." Clara looked at her husband, the lines around his eyes deeper now but his love as strong as ever. She thought of their 4 children sleeping safely inside, of the life they had built together, of the fear she had overcome and the trust she had learned. "Not for one single second," she said. "You took my hand when I was terrified and walked beside me until I was ready. You gave me back my courage and my hope. You gave me a home and a family and a love I never dreamed possible. Regret you? Kai, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I love you, Clara Emerson, and I love you." As the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars appeared, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Unionville broken and afraid, and she had found healing and wholeness in the patient love of a good man. The Wild West was hard and unforgiving in many ways, but it had also given her everything that mattered. She had faced her deepest fear and conquered it. She had opened her guarded heart and found it returned tenfold. She had built a life of meaning and purpose, surrounded by love. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. William grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, working alongside Kai and learning everything about cattle and land management. Grace developed a passion for music, and Kai bought her a piano shipped all the way from San Francisco, delighting in the way melodies filled their home. Samuel showed an aptitude for mechanics and engineering, constantly taking things apart to see how they worked. And Elizabeth, their youngest, had inherited her mother's love of books and her father's way with animals. When Clara turned 40, they threw a celebration that brought together friends from throughout the valley. The Emerson Ranch had become a gathering place over the years, known for its hospitality and the warmth of its owners. Clara looked around at all the faces, the community they had become part of, the life they had built, and felt profoundly grateful. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Kai found Clara in the library, running her fingers over the spines of the books they had collected together. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Everything. Nothing. Just how happy I am." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you remember that first day when you pulled me out of the path of that runaway horse? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, even terrified and covered in dust." Clara laughed. "Liar. I was a mess." "Beautiful mess, then." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so familiar and dear after all these years. "I also remember thinking that I wanted to know you to understand what put that sadness in your eyes. And now you know all my secrets, and I love you more for each one." Kai kissed her softly. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for trusting me enough to let me help you." "Thank you for being patient," Clara replied, "for walking beside me until I was ready. You changed my life, Kai. We changed each other's lives. That's what love does." As they stood there in the quiet library, holding each other close, Clara thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Unionville all those years ago. That woman had been running from pain, from scandal, from fear. She had been convinced that depending on anyone would only lead to heartbreak. How wrong she had been, and how grateful she was to have been proven wrong. The ranch continued to thrive as the children grew into young adults. William married a rancher's daughter from the next valley over, a capable young woman named Sarah who won everyone's heart immediately. They built a house on the northern section of the Emerson land and began raising their own family, giving Clara and Kai their first grandchildren. Grace spent a year studying music in San Francisco before returning home and opening a music school in Unionville. She taught piano and voice to children throughout the region, bringing culture and refinement to the rough frontier town. Samuel went east to study engineering, and surprised everyone by falling in love with the daughter of one of his professors. He brought her home to meet the family, and though she was initially overwhelmed by the vastness and wildness of Nevada, she soon fell in love with it as completely as Clara had. Elizabeth took the longest to find her path. She taught for a few years at the school where her mother had once worked, but eventually she announced her intention to become a doctor. It was an unusual choice for a woman, but Clara and Kai supported her without hesitation, funding her education and celebrating when she became one of the first female physicians in Nevada. Through all of it, Clara and Kai remained each other's anchor. They had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. There had been drought years when the cattle suffered, illness that took beloved friends, the normal struggles of raising children and managing a large property. But they had faced it all together, their love deepening with each challenge overcome. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. The ranch was filled with people, 3 generations of Emersons and the extended family of friends and neighbors they had accumulated over the years. During the celebration, William stood and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "They built more than a ranch here. They built a legacy of love and kindness and hard work. They showed us what a true partnership looks like, what it means to support each other through everything life throws at you. Father, you taught me that strength comes from gentleness, that patience is a virtue worth cultivating. Mother, you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear but facing it anyway. You both taught us that love, real love, is a choice you make every day. Thank you for choosing each other and for choosing us." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Clara held Kai's hand tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. This life, this beautiful, messy, wonderful life they had created together, exceeded anything she could have imagined that dusty day when she first arrived in Unionville. As the party wound down and the guests began to depart, Clara and Kai found themselves once again on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. It was their place, their ritual, as essential to them as breathing. 25 years, Kai mused. Seems impossible that it's been that long, and yet I can barely remember life before you. I can remember, Clara said. I remember being alone and afraid and convinced I would always feel that way. And then there was you, offering to walk beside me until I was ready. You kept that promise, Kai. You've been beside me every step. Where else would I be? He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, fitting against him as perfectly as she had that very first time. You're my home, Clara. Always have been, always will be. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other so well that words aren't always necessary. Clara thought about all the moments that had led them here, the fears conquered, the trust built, the love that had grown from a tentative seed into something strong and enduring. The sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. William was riding in from checking on the northern pastures, and Clara smiled at how naturally he sat in the saddle, how comfortable he was with the horses that had once terrified her so completely. I was thinking, Kai said, maybe it's time we started stepping back a bit, letting William take on more of the ranch management. We've earned some rest. What would we do with all that free time? Clara asked, amused. Travel, maybe. You've always wanted to see the ocean. We could visit Elizabeth in San Francisco, spend some time with the grandchildren, finally take that trip to San Diego you've been talking about. Clara considered this. The idea of traveling, of seeing new places with Kai by her side, was appealing. They had worked so hard for so long building the ranch, raising their children. Perhaps it was time to enjoy the fruits of their labor. I think I'd like that, she said. As long as we always come back here, this is home. Always, Kai agreed. This land, this house, this is where our hearts are. More years passed, bringing both joy and sorrow as years do. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, surrounded by the family she had helped raise. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a cottonwood tree she had loved. Clara grieved deeply for the woman who had become like a mother to her. William took over full management of the ranch, running it with the same integrity and care his father had modeled. Clara and Kai did travel, seeing the Pacific Ocean for the first time and marveling at its vastness. They visited their children in their various homes, delighted in their grandchildren, and slowly, gently, transitioned into the role of beloved elders. As Kai's 60th birthday approached, Clara noticed him slowing down more than usual. He tired easily and sometimes seemed short of breath. When she finally convinced him to see Elizabeth, who had moved back to Unionville to practice medicine, their daughter's face was grave. "It's his heart," Elizabeth told Clara privately. "It's weakening. There's not much I can do except advise rest and limited exertion." Clara felt fear grip her chest for the first time in years, the same paralyzing fear that had once frozen her in the face of horses. But she forced it down, knowing Kai needed her to be strong. She didn't tell him what Elizabeth had said, but she made sure he rested more, took over tasks he might have insisted on doing himself. Kai grumbled about being coddled, but he accepted her care with good grace. They celebrated his 60th birthday quietly, just family, and as Clara watched him surrounded by their children and grandchildren, she saw contentment in his eyes. Whatever time they had left, they would make the most of it. That night, lying in bed together as they had for over 30 years, Kai took Clara's hand. "I know Elizabeth told you about my heart," he said quietly. Clara tensed. "How did you know?" "I know you, my love. I saw it in your eyes, the way you started watching me like I might break." He brought her hand to his lips. "I'm not afraid, Clara. I've lived a full life, a happy life. You gave me that." "Don't talk like you're dying," Clara said, her voice breaking. "We have more time. We have to have more time. We'll have whatever time we're given and we'll be grateful for it." Kai pulled her close. "But Clara, if something happens to me, I need you to promise me something, anything. Promise me you won't shut down, won't close yourself off the way you had before we met. You have too much love to give, too much life to live. Our children need you, our grandchildren need you. Promise me you'll keep living, really living." Clara couldn't stop the tears. "I promise. But Kai, I don't know how to do this life without you. The same way you learn to face the horses. One step at a time, one day at a time. And you won't be alone. You'll have our family, our friends, all the love we've built together." They held each other through the night, and Clara tried to memorize everything about this moment, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, the scent of sage and leather that always clung to him, the strength of his arms around her. Kai lived 2 more years. Good years filled with laughter and grandchildren and quiet moments on the porch. He saw William's son take his first steps, heard Grace perform a concert of her own compositions, celebrated Samuel's return from the East with his growing family, and witnessed Elizabeth's marriage to a fellow physician who understood her dedication to her work. On a spring morning, with the valley in bloom and the air sweet with the scent of wildflowers, Kai passed away peacefully in his sleep, Clara beside him as she had been for over 3 decades. The grief was crushing, a weight that pressed on Clara's chest until she could barely breathe. But she remembered her promise, and she remembered all that Kai had taught her about facing fear and walking through pain. They buried him next to Mrs. Chen on the hill, beneath a massive oak tree he had loved. The entire valley came to pay their respects, testament to the man he had been and the legacy he had left. In the days and weeks that followed, Clara moved through her grief with the support of her children and grandchildren. She continued to live at the ranch, which William and Sarah had been running for years. She spent time with each of her children, passed down family stories to her grandchildren, and slowly, painfully, learned to live without Kai's physical presence while holding tight to his memory. One afternoon, several months after Kai's death, Clara found herself walking to the old stable. Most of the horses from their early days were long gone, but there was a new generation in the stalls, descendants of Sunshine and the others. She stopped at a stall holding a young Palomino filly, Sunshine's great-great-granddaughter. The horse came to the door, nosing at Clara's hand in search of treats. Clara stood there, remembering the first time Kai had brought her to meet sunshine, how terrified she had been, how patient he had been with her fear. She thought about all the times they had worked together in this stable, his steady presence giving her courage. "I miss him," she whispered to the filly. "Every single day I miss him." But even as she said it, she felt Kai's presence, not as a ghost but as a living part of her heart. He had walked beside her until she was ready to face her fears. And in doing so, he had become part of her, woven into the very fabric of who she was. Clara lived another 15 years, watching her grandchildren grow into adults, welcoming great-grandchildren into the world, and remaining a pillar of strength for her family. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by the life she and Kai had built together. On her 75th birthday, her children threw her a grand celebration. 4 generations of Emersons filled the ranch house, along with friends and neighbors from throughout the valley. As the party wound down, Clara's oldest grandson, named Kai in honor of his grandfather, approached her. He was 18 now, about to take on more responsibility at the ranch. "Grandma, tell me again about how you and Grandpa met," he asked. Clara smiled, settling into her chair with a glass of lemonade. She had told this story countless times, but it never lost its meaning. "I came to Unionville terrified and alone," she began. "Terrified of horses because of what happened to my father, terrified of trusting people because of what happened in San Francisco. And then one day, a runaway horse nearly trampled me, and your grandfather pulled me to safety." "And he helped you overcome your fear?" young Kai prompted, having heard this part many times. "He did more than that. He showed me that love isn't about never being afraid. It's about having someone who will walk beside you until you're ready to face your fears. He taught me that trust is built in small moments of kindness and patience. He gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You must miss him terribly." "Every day," Clara admitted, "but I also feel grateful for every moment we had." 32 years of marriage, 4 children, more grandchildren and great-grandchildren than I can count, and a love that changed everything. That's not something to mourn. That's something to celebrate. She looked around at her family, at the ranch that had been her home for over 50 years, at the life that had grown from that first terrified day in Unionville. Kai had promised to walk beside her until she was ready, and he had kept that promise in every way that mattered. As the sun set over the valley that evening, Clara sat on the porch one last time, in the spot where she and Kai had spent so many evenings. She could almost feel him beside her, his hand in hers, his steady presence a comfort and a blessing. "Thank you," she whispered to the gathering darkness, to the memory of the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "Thank you for walking beside me. Thank you for showing me what love really means. Thank you for everything." A gentle breeze stirred the air, warm and soft, like a caress. And Clara smiled, knowing that love like theirs didn't end with death. It lived on in their children, in the stories they told, in the legacy of kindness and courage they had built together. That night, Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face, ready at last to walk beside Kai once more. They buried her next to her husband beneath the oak tree, and the entire valley came to pay their respects to the schoolteacher who had become a beloved matriarch. The Emerson Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family with the stories of Clara and Kai woven into its very foundation. Young couples in Unionville still told their story, the rancher and the terrified schoolteacher, as an example of what patience and love could accomplish. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the valley, some swore they could see 2 figures on the porch of the old ranch house, sitting close together, watching the sunset, walking beside each other for all eternity.